Hello there and good evening. I'm Karim Zachary and you're watching World News Program on All 24 News Channel live from the capital Algiers. Up next are the headlines. Intense Zionist raids leave several martyrs as the resistance denies violating the truce. Coming up next, in Morocco, anti-normalization protesters keep up their sit-ins across several cities. Also in our news, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune hails the African Startups Conference as a success on defense. Seoul praises Algeria's military role, while Algiers and Moscow vow to boost their historic energy ties. And later on in Ukraine, Kiev and Moscow trade drone strikes. Zelensky threatens daily attacks on Russian energy sites as Trump warns more weapons to Kiev could endanger U.S. security. All this and more shortly. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, at least 33 Palestinians were killed in a new wave of Zionist airstrikes across Gaza Strip. 10 died in Al Buraij camp, 8 in Zawaida, and several others, including women and children, in a strike on a school sheltering displaced families. More deaths were reported in the north and Khan Yunis. In total, 40 raids hit the south, raising the death toll since the ceasefire to at least 70, with nearly 200 injured.
The war is still going on here. There is no truce, no calm. The fighting is still raging, with constant gunfire and airstrikes. Even bullets reach out tents while we're inside them. Enough is enough. It's been 2 years of suffering. We just want to rest, to have some peaceful mind. We live in constant fear and can't sleep peacefully. They tell us there's a ceasefire, but we can't see it. We fall asleep to the sound of bullets and air raids. The shooting never stops, day or night.
In another development, Hamas has rejected U.S. accusations of planning an imminent attack on violating the ceasefire. In a statement, the group said the claims are baseless and accused Israeli authorities of arming and funding criminal gangs in Gaza. Hamas stressed that its police are taking action against these groups under clear legal procedures.
Hamas rejects the allegations contained in the U.S. State Department statement and categorically denies the allegations against it regarding imminent attack or a violation of the ceasefire agreement. The movement calls on the U.S. administration to stop repeating the occupation's misleading narrative and to focus on curbing its repeated violations of the agreement, most notably its support for gangs and providing them with safe havens within the areas under its control.
On a similar note, Hamas says it remains committed to the ceasefire, accusing the occupation of fabricating pretexts to cover up its violations. Al-Qassam brigades also denied any clashes in Rafah, calling it a red zone fully controlled by the occupation. The movement condemned Netanyahu's decision to keep the Rafah crossing closed, calling it a clear breach of the deal. Hamas also warned the move blocks aid, delays rescue efforts, and breaks promises made to mediators. Meanwhile, the occupation has shut all crossings and suspended the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip.
Netanyahu's decision to prevent the opening of the Rafah crossing until further notice is a blatant violation of the terms of the Rafah ceasefire agreement and a denial of the commitments he made to the mediators and guarantors, also the continued closure of the Rafah crossing. Preventing the exit of the wounded and sick, the movement of citizens in both directions, and preventing the entry of special equipment needed in the search for the missing under the rubble will delay the recovery and delivery of the bodies. We call on the mediators and guarantors of the agreement to take urgent action to pressure the occupation to open the Rafah crossing immediately, oblige it to abide by all the terms of the agreement, and stop its ongoing crimes against our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry says relief teams have recovered the bodies of 414 people since the ceasefire began. In the past 24 hours alone, hospitals received 18 martyrs, including 10 recovered bodies, along with 3 wounded from Zionist strikes. The death toll from the war has now climbed to more than 68,000, with over 170,000 injured since October 7, 2023. Gaza's health ministry says it received the bodies of 15 martyrs released by the occupation on Sunday. Medical teams are examining and documenting the bodies before handing them over to their families. The ministry also noted that some of the bodies showed signs of abuse, including beatings, handcuffing, and blindfolding. The report by Karim Mustafawi now.
Dozens of Palestinian prisoners have been recently released from the Zionist occupation jails following a prisoner exchange agreement between Hamas and the Zionist entity. Yet their long-awaited liberation came shrouded by heartbreaking testimonies of suffering. Many were released with clear signs of both physical and psychological torture.
I am one of the people who has been suffering from certain illness for almost a year and a half. We have repeatedly requested to be taken to hospitals or to be diagnosed by specialist doctors, but our requests have been rejected.
I used to weigh 127 kilograms and today I weigh 68 kilograms. My shoulder, they beat me on it. I have a tear in my shoulder. Immediately after their release, many were transferred to hospitals to receive treatment for fractures and the effect of the deliberate medical neglect. 2 of the prisoners suffered from severe chest pain and swollen feet, so they were brought to the emergency room to run more tests, get x-rays and necessary imaging. They are currently getting treatment at the complex at the emergency department. It indicates that these patients were subjected to severe beatings, reflecting the extent of violence. While some made it home alive, others were released in body bags, with forensic evidence pointing to violent torture.
What you see is one example of the cases we have. There are cases that have their wrists and hands tied with the presence of bruises, and other matters in addition to gunshots in the chest and the head.
According to the Palestinian Prisoners Committee, more than 11,000 Palestinians remain imprisoned across 23 Zionist detention centers. Among them, 100 are reportedly suffering from chronic illnesses.
And in another story, the Qassam brigades say they handed over the bodies of 2 Israeli prisoners to the occupation on Saturday night. In a statement, the group said the bodies were recovered in Gaza Strip. They also announced finding another prisoner's body during search operations and may hand it over once the conditions allow. Al-Qassam brigades also warned that any occupation escalation could disrupt those operations and delay further handovers. A young Palestinian man has died after being detained and left to bleed during a large Zionist raid on refugee camps in the occupied West Bank. Rescue crews were blocked from searching or reaching him, in the Al-Ain camp near Nablus, and others were wounded by live fire. Meanwhile, Tubas has been under heavy raids and siege since last night, with widespread destruction reported.
We were sitting here, safe and sound, and as you can see, the place is closed off to us. No one enters or leaves. We are all journalists. No strangers were entering or staying with us. Then the bombing happened right next to us, in the middle of the house. Our colleague's the broadcasting engineer was martyred, and our colleague's child's son was also martyred.
Still in the occupied West Bank, the Zionist forces launched a wave of arrests across the entire West Bank on Sunday. According to the Palestinian news agency, 20 people were detained, including children and former prisoners, in raids across Salfit, Ramallah, Tubas, and Nablus. Moving on now to other regional news. In Morocco, to be precise, thousands took to the streets in several cities to show support for Palestine and demand an end to normalization with the Zionist entity. Protesters called the policy treason and urged the Mahsen regime to cut all ties. They also vowed to keep up the pressure until normalization is reversed. In Morocco, still, the Generation Z movement hit the streets again Saturday night, calling out corruption and the worsening economic situation. After a brief pause, protests returned for a third week, with thousands rallying in cities like Casablanca, Rabat, Tangier, and Marrakesh. Let's get more details with Yassine Arikti now.
Thousands of young Moroccans rallied across major cities on Saturday as the Gen Z 212 movement resumed protests demanding jobs creation, an end to corruption and better public services. The latest demonstrations come amid escalating youth unemployment reaching 38% and growing outrage over the state of public health care after the recent deaths of pregnant women at Agadir's hospital, which shocked the nation. Protesters say the tragedy reflects the deep decay of essential services long neglected by authorities.
In all our demonstrations, we express the hope that the king and the country will listen to us with attentive ears and compassionate hearts, and that they will respond to our demands for access to healthcare, education, and employment in our country.
Mobilized through social media and operating without formal leadership, the Gen Z 212 collective has become a powerful voice for a generation that feels abandoned. But the government's response, marked by mass arrests and allegations of police violence, has only fueled anger and distrust.
This demonstration was organized to unite our ranks and coordinate our actions. It sends a message to the authorities that even after more than 10 days of pause, our determination remains strong. We will continue until our demands are met, not just with words, but through real action. We want solutions that truly respond to the needs of young people and make us feel that our daily sacrifices are not in vain.
Beyond the economic grievances, the protests reveal a deeper crisis of confidence between Morocco's youth and the Mahsen, the kingdom's entrenched power structure.
Whether this movement will bear its fruits, I think it's very soon to tell. There will still be, political changes that will come in the upcoming days, and up until then we cannot really predict what's going to happen because, in politics there are a lot of variables that enter in the equation and a lot of things can change.
As the government prepares to showcase itself internationally with the 2030 World Cup, many wonder whose victory will truly be celebrated, the nation's or that of a system increasingly at odds with its own future.
Morocco's imports, meanwhile, of petroleum products have hit a record high in the first 9 months of the year, a clear sign of the country's deepening energy crisis. The surge comes amid growing monopoly over the sector by companies tied to businessmen close to the royal palace. The report is by Zahra Farjani.
As internal pressures rise and Morocco's dependence on foreign energy deepens, the country's economic imbalance is becoming more pronounced. The continuous surge in oil derivatives imports has exposed the fragility of Morocco's energy system and its heavy reliance on external markets. The numbers tell the story. During the first 9 months of the year, Morocco's maritime imports of oil derivatives grew by 5%, averaging around 250,000 barrels per day, already surpassing the total imports of last year. Quarterly data shows that the third quarter marked the peak of domestic demand, with an average of 254,000 barrels per day. February alone hit a record high of 289,000 barrels per day, highlighting a sharp spike in consumption in the absence of effective policies to control demand or boost local production. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of this crisis is Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch's use of his political influence to strengthen the monopoly of his Afriqiya group, which dominates Morocco's fuel market amid a lack of competition and transparency. This blending of political power and wealth comes at a heavy cost for ordinary Moroccans, turning fuel prices into an easy profit tool while eroding citizens' purchasing power.
In other regional news, the Sahrawi Republic has once again rejected any talks that ignore its right to self-determination under UN resolutions. The response came after Washington submitted an informal draft resolution to the UN Security Council on Western Sahara. The Polisario Front accused the same powers behind Morocco's invasion decades ago of blocking today's peace efforts. It said it's open to peace, but only if Morocco respects Western Sahara's territorial integrity. The front stressed that the Sahrawi state is a reality and urged countries back in Morocco not to be drawn into what it called a dangerous adventure.
The Sahrawi side will not accept any negotiation, dialogue, or even discussion that is not based on the Sahrawi people's inalienable and non-expiring right to self-determination and independence. The front will not take part in any process or political initiative that doesn't stem for the legal nature of Sahrawi people question as decolonization issue, one that can only reach a just and definitive solution through Sahrawi people's exclusive exercise of their rights as recognized by all resolutions and rulings of international and continental organizations and courts.
And in Algeria, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, chaired a cabinet meeting in which a draft law on the judiciary has been approved, fulfilling hence President Abdelmajid Tebboune's pledge to improve judges' social status, including retirement and housing benefits. He also called for specialized judicial training and new judicial posts to boost the sector. The cabinet also approved 3 new desalination plants in Chlef, Mostaganem, and Tlemcen provinces, each with a daily capacity of 300,000 cubic meters of water. President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune urged scientific studies to address drought and water use. And ahead of the African Startup Conference, the president called for top-notch organization to make it a key platform for African youth and innovation. And Algeria's Army Chief of Staff, Army General Said Chengriha, attended an air show in Seoul on Sunday as part of the ADEX 2025 exhibition, one of the world's top defense and aviation events. Army General Chengriha watched air maneuvers by the Korean Air Force and met with its commander, who praised Algeria's military standing and commitment to keeping pace with global defense trends. In our news as well, Algeria and Russia have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening historic energy ties, exploring new opportunities in exploration, production, and technical development. The announcement came during Algeria's participation in the Russian Energy Week Forum in Moscow. The Algerian delegation also held talks with major Russian energy companies, including Gazprom, Gazpromneft, Zarubezhneft, and Lukoil. Spain's Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska arrived in Algiers on Sunday evening for a high-level visit, the first by a member of Pedro Sanchez's government since 2022. He was welcomed by Algeria's Interior Minister Said Sayoud. The visit comes with a big security and migration agenda, with talks expected to focus on irregular migration, border control, and counter-terrorism. Grande Marlaska is leading a large delegation of top security officials, signaling Madrid's push to rebuild trust and step up cooperation with Algiers. Algeria is calling for a stronger quota-based IMF with enough resources to support global financial stability. Speaking on behalf of a group of countries at the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, Algeria's central bank governor, Salah ad-Din Talib, backed the IMF chief's reform plans and stressed a realistic, pragmatic, and gradual approach to future reviews.
The most effective economic policies today are those founded on international cooperation and coordination, rebuilding financial safety buffers, and strengthening the resilience of economies against future shocks. Relying solely on traditional tools under current constraints is neither effective nor sustainable. A realistic, pragmatic, and gradual approach remains the best path to ensure the success of upcoming reforms.
And in other topical news, Ukraine says its drones hit an oil refinery in Samara and a gas plant in Orenburg, southern Russia that is, knocking the refinery out of service and sparking a fire. Kiev has stepped up strikes on Russian energy sites since August to disrupt fuel supplies and cut Moscow's funding. Meanwhile, President Zelensky said Ukraine forces now target Russian energy facilities almost daily, urging Western allies to unite on stronger pressure against Moscow.
I spoke with Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Army, in particular about our long-range strike capabilities. There is an increase in both the distance and the accuracy of our long-range sanctions against Russia. In fact, every day there are strikes on Russian oil refining, and this works to bring Russia back to reality.
Meanwhile, Russia says its air defenses shut down 323 Ukrainian drones, 2 guided bombs, and 3 US-made HIMARS missiles in just 24 hours. Moscow also claims its forces struck a HIMARS launcher with an Iskander missile and took control of 2 more towns. In the same context, US President Donald Trump warned that sending more weapons to Ukraine could put America's security at risk. Speaking on Sunday, Trump said President Zelensky had requested advanced weapons, including Tomahawk missiles, but he argued that approving the deal would expose the US to foreign threats.
We can't give, if we're going to be sure, we can't give all of our weapons to Ukraine. We just can't do that. And I've been very good to President Zelensky and to Ukraine, but we can't give, if we're going to be short, I don't want to do that. I can't jeopardize the United States.
In another story, Sudan's army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan says he won't accept any peace deal imposed on the country. He rejected negotiations with the Quartet or any other party. Speaking in Atbara, al-Burhan said he only supports a peace that puts the interest of the Sudanese people first.
There are no negotiations underway with anyone. Certain actors wanted to negotiate with us in order to find a solution that would benefit our country and our people, a solution that would end this war and restore the country's dignity and unity. We welcome any peace approved with the Sudanese people. However, no state has the right to impose peace on us or to impose a government on us.
And a daring jewelry heist hit the Louvre Museum in Paris on Sunday, forcing it to close for the day. France's Interior Minister said the thieves, 3 or 4 people, pulled off the robbery in just 7 minutes, stealing priceless heritage pieces. One item was later recovered after the thieves dropped it near the museum while fleeing.
Ce camion nacelle arrive sur les lieux 9h30.
This crane truck arrived at the scene at 9:30 a.m. At 9:34, they entered the gallery, and 6 to 7 minutes later, they exit from this gallery and the 4 criminals left. A total of 9 items were targeted by the criminals and 8 were actually stolen.
And finally, it's time to catch up on other news stories making headlines in the News in Brief with Sofian Kantouri.
Afghanistan and Pakistan agreed to an immediate ceasefire during talks held Saturday in the Qatari capital Doha. Pakistani Defense Minister announced Sunday on X that both sides had reached agreement and would meet again on October 25th in Istanbul to discuss further details. Millions of demonstrators across the United States took the streets Saturday to protest President Donald Trump's policies. According to US media, around 7 million people joined peaceful rallies in more than 2,700 cities nationwide, led by the No Kings movement. The United States and China are set to resume trade talks next week in Malaysia, in a renewed effort to ease tensions between the world's two largest economies. U.S. Treasury Secretary said he discussed preparations for the upcoming meeting with Chinese Premier during talks at the White House. Colombian President Gustavo Petro condemned the United States for violating his country's maritime sovereignty, saying U.S. forces killed a fisherman in the Caribbean Sea, denying any link between the victim and drug trafficking.
And that's the end of our news for tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye.